So my name is Neil Leroux. I'm an associate professor of atmospheric science in the Department of Physics at the University of Nevada, Reno.
And we certainly have seen our fair share of wildfires here in Northern California. Let's start off with the news at hand, the fires burning in Southern California, and kind of what you're seeing from your end.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, we really saw this event coming in advance. It was really well advertised in the weather forecast models that we'd be looking at these Santa Ana winds and really the kind of upper end version of those winds where we have really strong upper level winds crossing from east to west out of the Great Basin and moving offshore. And that really set the stage for the unfortunate events that are unfolding. But maybe even more so, the profound lack of any sort of rainfall across Southern California. We have this huge disparity between Northern California and Southern California this year as far as total rain, where we're looking at values of 1 to 10% of the typical amount of rain that Southern California would have gotten. So when the winds get here and the fuels are that dry, it's really an explosive mixture.
And in terms of winter wildfires, like what we're seeing, some of these rapidly intensifying weather conditions, talk to me a little bit about the difference between a late summer, early fall event and then something that happens kind of in the middle of winter.
Yeah. Unfortunately, sometimes during the middle of the winter, the winds are stronger. And sometimes that's not a problem because we've already had rainfall. But these winter storm systems, they have a stronger jet stream to work with usually. And the atmosphere is a little more revved up. And so we can actually generate stronger winds sometimes in the middle of the winter than we would in the fall. We think about those fall events. They certainly can have very strong winds and devastating impacts. But in a typical year, we certainly hope that we get some rainfall by now that suppresses some of those fire conditions. And again, unfortunately, that has not been the case this year across Southern California.
And Southern California for decades was kind of the home base for some of these mega fires in California. That certainly has seen migration to the north due to a warming climate. I know you're a researcher in the wildfire area. So talk to me a little bit about climate change and its impacts as we're starting to see more of a widespread kind of dangerous fire situation in California.
Yeah, for summer fires, it's pretty clear cut. We see an increase in atmospheric temperatures and at least increasingly dry fuels, more days conducive to extreme fire growth. During the winter, it's a little more complicated because it has a lot to do with the variability in these weather systems, when we get the winds, when we get the rain. But the thing that we definitely know is the fire season has lengthened. Um, we are seeing increasing occurrence of these sort of midwinter fires. And again, Southern California, unfortunately, is going to be ground zero for a lot of that. But even when you think about events like the Camp Fire in Northern California, in November, that was a very late season fire. And again, had to do with the lack of rain up to that point when the winds start arriving. But yeah, these winter fires are a little bit more complicated than the summer, just hot, dry, and windy conditions. It's a little bit more nuanced the way we think about the relation of these sorts of fires to climate change than we do with those summer fires.
And in Southern California, we're certainly seeing the devastation. A lot of homes, vehicles, places of work that are burned out. Uh, we've heard a lot about the wildland urban interface. And for some of those areas, what does the future look like as we start to move into some of these more vulnerable areas?
Yeah, the big picture is that the phrase living with fire really makes a lot of sense. We need to find a way to create um, fire adapted communities. Fire is gonna, always has been and always will be part of the landscape here in California. And already thinking ahead to when we rebuild in these environments, and obviously we have a lot of housing needs in California, making sure that we do so in a way that creates a safe and sustainable community in these places. And again, unfortunately, with these particularly upper end wind events, some places in the wildland urban interface were exposed to more hazardous conditions during this particular event, especially for the Eaton fire around Pasadena, than they often are. We have really strong winds that managed to come all the way over the top of the San Gabriel Mountains, descend down into town. And in some of those locations, they're more typically sheltered from the winds, but not in these upper end events like this. And obviously, we see the devastating impact of that.
One of the other questions that we've been hearing is about winds and just feeling like they're so much worse than what they used to be. Has your research indicated anything to verify that?
Yeah, my research does not specifically look at increasing occurrence of just these kind of atmospheric winds. A lot of what we work on are fire generated winds. When the fires get so intense, they start creating their own weather. And we're really seeing an uptick in those sorts of conditions. Again, for these winter fires, it's more about that timing of precipitation and the onset of these winds. Oftentimes, the extreme winds that we might get in the winter, maybe they don't catch our attention as much because the fuels are wet. Um, Whereas when we get these really high end events without the antecedent rainfall, that's when we're really in trouble.
The other thing is Southern California off to one of the driest starts of the water year. Do you have any information to add to that?
Yeah, I mean the signal is just extreme across California right now, where we've had really wet weather from kind of the Bay Area northward and extremely dry weather, and we're used to that sort of dynamic, but that's kind of on steroids this year, where we've literally had nothing really across Southern California. And unfortunately, looking ahead in the next 2 weeks, what we see in the forecast models are more east winds, not to the extent that we've seen here, and without the heavy rainfall that we need to change the situation. And so, even as the most acute elements of this event fade, we're not out of the woods yet by any means.
One of the big pushbacks that we've heard as well is forest clearing. And in some of these areas, they're populated areas. I'm not sure outside of the Eaton fire, which does have, like as you mentioned, off the San Gabriel Mountains, but Pacific Palisades, or there is certainly fuel, but these are highly populated areas.
They are, and unfortunately, when the homes become the fuels, it really makes matters that much worse. The embers that shed off of houses, especially during these high winds, create these ember storms that then ignite the neighbor's house, and it's a kind of chain reaction effect as it moves through that populated area. And obviously, on the edges of these communities, that's where we talk about this interface between the natural vegetation and then the built environment, and it's a really problematic mixture sometimes, but especially during these winds, something that might seem like a reasonable amount of defensible space suddenly isn't when you're tossing embers in 70-mile-an-hour winds from trees that are torching away. So, it's unfortunately these high-end events have really high-end consequences and might make the efforts that you've already put in for the defensible space less useful or less effective at mitigating the impacts of the fire.
Looking ahead, this feels like it's a bit of an eye opener that we're never immune from catastrophic wildfires. In your research, what does the future look like?
Yeah, unfortunately, the future looks like a future with more fire than the environment that we have now. And underlying that is basically that warming and drying signal that we see, especially in the summer and moving into the fall. Um, and so again, it really underscores the need to figure out how to build our communities to live with the fire, because it's not going anywhere soon. Fuel management, fuel reduction is going to play a major role in that in communities throughout California, whether it's in Northern California or Southern California, but also then hardening communities so that they can withstand the impact of some of these fires.
And anything in your research that is signaling hope for our fight against wildfires and climate change?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really on everybody's radar now. What a profound societal challenge this is. It's kind of become the major societal threat living here in California. And so I think the interest in and willingness to rally the troops to address these issues, especially when it comes to putting more prescribed fire and fuel reduction work, I think that energy is there, and I think the challenge for us is really following through on that to make sure these events don't go as bad as these ones have.
Excellent. Anything that I didn't ask that you wanted to get in there?
Um, no, I think I'm good.
Just watching all the weather models, I'm sure.
Yeah, yep. As I'm sure you are too.